Well, I think just about everybody's made the pilgrimage. Um, a couple of things. Again, thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed yourself. And I wanted to thank the chefs. Mandy was the chief chef, the person that knew what they ate there because she ate there. And Andrew helped her a great deal. There was others of us that no, there was other people that helped some, but those two really put out the work. Mandy had problems with uh, uh, family this morning that wasn't well, so we had to make some adjustments. But let's give a big hand. um, Again, if you're able to help us, a lot of you have already done a lot of the cleanup, but we have more later. And unless I've forgotten something, Mandy, you're on. Tell us about Spain or Catalonia or Barcelona or whatever's on your mind.
Um, when Belton asked me to talk about this topic, my life in Spain, it was really hard because I imagine somebody saying to you, "Can you talk about the last 32 years of your life?" And it was hard for me to focus. Hard for me to organize. So I'll show you in a minute how I organize this, but it'll be like little vignettes, really, about things that I struck me, cultural things, and how it affected me as an immigrant over there. I was an immigrant there for so long. Um, so let's see. So also some of the things I was thinking to present were things that came up from conversations with various people here and also over there. My husband had a cycling wine tour business, so often I was working with tourists from here. And actually, most of the questions people asked me was just about my normal life. So I'll probably talk about some of those things too. So you can do the next one. Oh, wait, I do need to say one thing. That's me when I went over in 1990. I'm in a bar called Quatre Gats, which is four cats. In Catalan, that's an expression when you're just trying to say it was just us two or, a couple people. I can't remember what we say in English. Do we say something like that? It was just us. I don't know. But it's an expression basically saying that it's just a couple people. And that's where a lot of famous artists used to hang out in the modernist times. And this is a view from my kitchen that I had for 20 some years, and it's my favorite place. I'll show you later some with the view a little more, but that's where I cooked. I could sit there and have your coffee, read. It was lovely. That was what sold us the house. Okay, we can move on. So this is how I'm doing it. I'm looking at my community, what my community was over there, with starting at the periphery, the Spanish, Spain, also going then to I'll say Catalonia probably, but it's Catalonia. Then Barcelona, Alt Penedès is where I moved later. Torres de Foix, it was my home where I had my house all the many years. And the home is El Molí, was the name. El Molí means mill. It was a mill, a paper mill. It was built as a paper mill. Later, you'll see it, but later they also used it for olive oil mill, wine, grain. It was the first source of electricity in town, but it was built to be a paper mill. All right. Okay. So before I really get into it, a lot of people ask why I went or why did I think of going there, besides the fact that it's a nice country. I studied languages. That was my background. So my undergrad was in French and German. I lived in Germany, Switzerland, and France beforehand. before I went to Spain. I got my MA in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. So I was in the educational domain. I worked in the Bay Area for a while before I went to Spain. Obviously, very quickly, when you're in the education domain, you know Spanish is an important thing to know. And I thought, well, another thing was I was 28 and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm almost 30 and I need to be settled down by the time I'm 30. So I better do my traveling before I, so I was thinking, I want to go over, see my friends that I had up in northern part of Europe. I had a lot of very good friends there. And I looked for a job before I went. I interviewed for a job. I had a friend in grad school who was from Barcelona, and he recommended this place, IEN, North American Studies. It was perfect for me because I teach English there. There were 125 North American teachers there. It was rare for Americans to be over there because it's very hard. Paperwork is very hard to get any kind of work as an American in Spain. English people or Europeans have it much more, it's easier. So this place was great at the time. They hired me. I went to a conference in San Francisco. They hired me, moved me over, and for the first 4.5 years, I worked at this institute. I moved in 1990 in August. This place, depending on time, it will be relevant later, the place I worked. Okay, the next one. So this is Spain. And I lived up in Catalonia at the top right. There are 11 autonomies in Spain. And that's one of the richer, that and the Basque country are the richest areas of Spain. They were also the ones that had the most issues, political issues. But it's beautiful there. It's just, France is only, where I lived, it's a couple hours away. And the port is beautiful. It's 2,000-year-old port. So it's an amazing place. That city is beautiful. The next one. Okay, this is Catalonia. And like I said, the first 4 or 5 years I lived in Barcelona. And then when I got married, Patty and my husband's name was Patty from Ireland. We moved to the Alt Penedès. A farm country. It's inland, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And here's my general timeline. The next one, please. Generally, my timeline there was, as I said, I moved in 1990. 92, I met my husband or the person I was going to marry. Those are the years of the Olympics too. That was an important time in Barcelona. Then in 94, got married. And then we had kids, 95, Claire, and 98, Tommy. And that year, 98, that's when we moved to the country. And pretty much all of that time afterwards, I was there. I would drive into Barcelona for work, but I lived out in the countryside. Oh yes, I didn't point that out. This is Alt Penedès. That was my house. As I said, it's 11,600 square meters. Three stories. Beautiful place. Square feet. Thank you. It's 1,056 square meters. Okay, thanks. All right, ready for the next one? Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit, talk about some of my experiences that sort of happened at the state level or the national level. I'm just going to focus on a couple experiences. But before I start, if somebody says Spain to you, and I know a lot of you have traveled there, but if you hadn't, or even so, what are your impressions? What would be the first thing that would come to your mind if you think of Spain? When you think about it? Color? bright, and a lot of people think of that. They think of the people bright, the colors, but also the people passionate, things like that. Sunshine. Yeah, that's like one of the first things I usually hear: sunshine, bullfight, food. Anything else? Okay, you can move to the next one. These are the things I hear. Not only did I experience, but what people would come up with. People would say in Spain, they think of bullfighting, flamenco was a big deal in Spain. You'll see later, but I really make that differentiation between Spain and Catalonia, like they would want me to. And before I went over, I was thinking Catholicism. I thought, oh, it's going to be conservative that way. Or I thought they were a little more subdued. Women wear black and have their hair in a bun, but it's not like that. Also, I had already known when I had lived in other parts in Europe that everybody went for the beaches in Spain. And the king and queen, the current one, they're also somehow touched my life. I was going to show you this. This huge thing that I don't even know how to store was my doctorate. When I got my doctorate, this is the diploma, and you have to wait 2 years because supposedly the king has to sign and stamp your all diploma, not just this one. I mean, even other diplomas you get. They played a part of my life that way. Should we move on? Okay. I wanted to explain a little bit what it means, a little bit how the Spanish, at least the time when I went there, how they looked at foreigners and immigrants. It really changed a lot in the last 32 years. But when I first went there, well, before I do that, let me talk a little bit about this guy, Franco. A lot of people don't like to talk about him, but he's still very present in people's lives. It was a 40-year dictatorship. And I talked to a lot of older people that still had very fresh memories of it. People were very divided. I mean, people had been on both sides of the Civil War and were neighbors. I had even met a guy that told me he had worked for I can't remember what they're called, but like the Gestapo, sort of like the secret police that told us. So people were very careful around there. It's been a long time, but I still see, in my opinion, this is Mandy's world, in my opinion, I still see effects there's a lot of, nobody likes conflict. They're very passive. It could be, if there's something they don't like, they're going to be passive aggressive about it. They don't want to have public conflict, to the point that they don't like to talk about rules, because if you are talking about rules or laws or things that matter that way, they feel that they're going to be associated with Franco. So people are, it's not that they don't have them, but it's just people are uncomfortable around anything that might be construed to be authority. So I just wanted to say that first. And also another thing, so you have that in the background. But at the same time, people just don't really move. The target, the goal in life is to stay with your family. So, for example, if you lose your job, usually you have, I mean, if you've been with a job for a while, you have unemployment for quite a while. The idea, like it could be 2 years or more, so that you can find work to be with your family. So all of these things sort of come into play with some of these things. Also, Catholicism was very strong. Franco had agreements with the Catholic Church. So the church stayed and toed the line with Franco. So that also was something important to, like where I lived, where they still didn't like the Spanish authority. So they might be more against the Catholic Church. But it is sort of, Catholicism is the national religion. And when people would ask me about my religion or what I came from, and I'd try to explain it, I'd first say Protestant. Think, oh, I've heard of that. Is that Christian? They'd ask me things like that. But anyway, they did equate Catholicism to Christianity. How that affected my life was all of this is, as an immigrant, they look at immigrants a little bit like, why couldn't you find a job near your family? Is there something wrong with you? It's like, you know, why? So it wasn't so hard for me because they really, really were into English and learning English. So I could just say, oh, I'm teaching English. And they thought, oh, a native speaker. That's, the best person to get. So they didn't ask me so much. But there were people like that. I mean, I talked to them. They'd say, why did their boss who is from Sevilla, why is he working here? Couldn't he get a job there? What's happened? What did he do? So there's a little bit of mistrust that way with, foreigners that way. I mean, things have changed, but that's how it was when I went there. We also had to have everybody has to have your ID, your national ID with you at all times. You can and that always worried me because I was always afraid I'd lose my identity, my ID. I had foreigners had what we call it looks like this. It's an NIE, and this is where the Spanish level came into play. It was I know people probably complain about bureaucracy here. It's hell there. It's hell. You had to have this ID. You had to have it, but to get it, um, there were times that we had to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning at the place where you could get it to already wait in line. Um, and then they started trying to use the internet or online services so that you could sign up. But what happened? The mafia started buying all the slots for appointments, so you had to pay a lot of money to even just get an appointment. So it was really, really hard to get your ID, but you had to have it. And that was something that was always difficult for us. That's what I think of when I think of Spain. I think of that, the bureaucracy. We can move to the next one. So let's look at Catalonia, the next one then. To really know more about Spain, you sort of have to distinguish it with Catalonia. I really feel like my identity and Catalonia's identity grew up a little bit together, at least the modern Catalonia. They've really, ever since Franco died in the 70s, the Spanish government has given more and more autonomy to the autonomies, and that means that they didn't feel as oppressed as they had in the past. I mean, they weren't allowed to speak Catalan in public. So slowly but surely, they've been trying to let the world know who they are. And so a lot of the things like what we had today, that bread, as I said, the bread with tomato, they've sort of branded everything and made everything into a sellable thing now. They want the world to know about them. And they had a bit of they were there was a bit of a lack of self-confidence. I mean, Europe looked a little bit down on Spain. They used to say, I heard people say this. I heard somebody say this a couple years ago. They said, Africa starts at the border of France, which is a very, very racist thing to say. But what they're trying to say is that Spain is, not civilized, is what they'd say. So they had this kind of chip on their shoulder a lot of times. The Catalans would refer to us and the rest of Spain. They always talked about the rest of Spain. And the language they would say is not Spanish, it's Castilian, because they said Spain doesn't just have one language. So they really were trying to sell their own language. Anything that they thought Spain was for, they were against. They were against the Catholic Church, although they say they still like the traditions. They weren't believers. They said they hated bullfighting, they hated flamenco, and yeah. But they still, like I said, they hated a lot of those things, but they still practiced them. Like they still liked having the national religious holidays. They really enjoyed those, and they still had baptism and communion and lots of celebrations like that. The stereotype of Catalans that I hear from other parts of Spain is that they're cheap, that they count their pennies, and well, sometimes I saw a little bit of that too. But this is their flag at the top. I think they said it was worn because after a battle with the Normans, the Earl of Barcelona had his hands bloody, and he'd tried to reach the flag, and those are supposed to be blood from his fingers. Um, this one down here is the flag of independence. Um, this is interesting. You were asking me today, Janet, about if independence is still relevant. It is. It's still a big deal. In 2017, the politicians wanted to have a referendum to see how people felt about leaving Spain. The governments declared it illegal because it's not constitutional, so they really got ready for the day that they were going to vote, October 1st. The Catalans decided to make the voting centers in schools so they could say to everybody, "Oh, we're just having a nice school celebration that day." A lot of people hid in the schools for the day of because the police came and they were cracking down on anybody that looked like they might vote. And there was a lot of pictures of people, like he saw all these pictures of people in the voting room pretending like they're playing puzzles and things like that while the police are watching them because people would come and vote. And after the vote, here's them voting here. I can't remember how many politicians were arrested and imprisoned. And the president of Catalonia fled to Belgium. I don't think he's come back yet. But it's still fresh. It's still a problem, and I'm going to talk about basically how my position is or how that affected my life in a second. I just wanted to show you quickly. If you look at the next one, the language was a huge deal. What you spoke already told you sort of what statement you're making. They sort of forgave me when I first came over because everybody assumed I was there for Spanish, so they'd speak Spanish to me. But it changed later as I learned the language. But you can see a little bit, it's Latin based. If you take a look, I had studied French, so that really helped me with my Catalan. There's bonjour, bon dia, and buenos dias. So you can see they're similar, right? Except for the bottom one. But look, there's parler in French, and parlar, and then hablar. So frankly, when I was over there, I could understand the Catalan, but I think it is because of my French. It helped me. Anyway, I went over there without knowing either language, so I learned it on the go. So to this day, I still feel more comfortable speaking Catalan. I don't know, it's not a statement. I just like the language more than Spanish. And I learned it basically when my kids went to school, and I thought I had to go to the teacher-parent meetings. I thought, well, if anybody can teach me, they can. So I would just go and speak in Catalan, and I felt comfortable around them. And where I lived, everybody spoke Catalan. The thing that I discovered, though, is that the minute I started speaking, I had always assumed that people were speaking Spanish to me because of who I was. But then as I started speaking to Catalan to everybody, I realized that some people they were making a stand speaking Spanish, and they got miffed if I sort of persisted with Catalan because they didn't want a foreigner in their face with this thing. So I would try so hard to listen to what language they were speaking and go with that. It wasn't easy sometimes. Even at a dinner table, sometimes I'd be speaking Spanish and Catalan at the same time. So the next one. So where do I stand? Oh, the Catalans' symbol that they gave themselves was the donkey. Basically, it was sort of a funny thing because to fight against the Spanish bull, so they wanted to say we're the donkey, and they have a native donkey there. Where was I? Well, felt like I was right here. It was not. It's me. My husband didn't have this problem, but I felt uncomfortable about taking a position as an American. I mean, I didn't. I felt like that's your fight. I don't ask me. So I really became two-faced. I hate to say it. If I were with my friends who loved Catalan and independence, I'd sort of say, yeah, yeah, that sounds great. But if I were with people who were against it, I would just sort of listen and see what they had to say too. I rarely said my opinion about that because that would get a real discussion going. I never voted for any of those things. I mean, I wasn't only allowed to vote for local municipal things. Um, a lot of foreigners who lived there bashed the Catalans, but I had a good experience with them. Um, my kids have Claire feels more comfortable speaking in Catalan and Tommy feels more comfortable speaking in Spanish. So I don't know how they picked it up. We spoke English at home. So anyway, that was I still don't, I think I would say I'm against independence because everybody's splitting up everywhere. And my pension is with Madrid. So I'd rather that they stay together. We'll see what happens. Okay, the next one. Okay, looking at Barcelona, we can go to the next one. I lived in the old area of Barcelona. I don't think you can really see it there. I lived in the oldest part of Barcelona. It's called the Gothic Quarters. And where I lived dates back, like I said, 2,000 years. So it's pretty amazing thinking you're walking the same paths. It's, people who were there for so long ago. You want to go to the next one? I had the opportunity, this place that I worked, the IEN, they had me, they outsourced teaching. So I worked at a lot of different places. I really had an amazing opportunity. They were, this place I worked was actually founded by Catalan people, and it was supposed to be a cultural thing about North America, the United States. But the people who were founders were very established people from Barcelona, so they always got the good contracts. So this first picture up there in the top left, that's my street. I lived on that street, right in the heart. I lived really, really close. Oh, I didn't put it up there. I lived close to their central government, the Catalan government. Oh, I guess I'm on the wrong one. And this is the cathedral that I lived a few minutes away from. When I first went there, it wasn't gentrified. And when I told people where I lived, people feared for my life because there was a lot of drug dealing down there. But I don't have a picture of my apartment, but it was amazing. It was 100 years before that had been rich people's homes. So it was just beautiful. But I could walk everywhere. And that's the thing I miss here is just the walkability. I walked everywhere for everything. I never drove. And I lost 20 pounds in the first semester. Okay, that's what happened. Okay. The thing that was difficult for me living in downtown, though, and I'm happy we moved to the country, is the people's space. People don't worry; they have no problem being in crowds. People on the metro, or if they're all excited because Barca won a match, everybody is very close together. They don't mind. There's no personal space, and that was sort of hard for me sometimes. Oh, and that's a Rambla. I was also very close to that. That's the area where people do a lot of walking up through the town. The next one. I'd gotten ahead of myself. This is where I worked in all these different sites. I taught the Catalan police. I worked in their academy. The Mossos, they're called Mossos, and they were a brand new force because until then, Spain wouldn't let the autonomies have their own people as police. If you were going to become a police officer, you had to go to another autonomy because they didn't want any fraternization, right? So that was the first. When I went there, they were just getting their own police force, and I taught them. They'd have to salute me when I walked in. I also taught, this is the Catalan government, and I taught the foreign minister there because he was going to go all over the United States to sponsor, or what did you say, promote Catalunya during the Olympics. I taught at the Opera House, the Liceu. I taught all the musicians, the singers, and the orchestra. They let me see their rehearsals for free. And that's the University of Barcelona, one of their buildings. So I really, really hit the jackpot that way with my workplace. I was all over the city. And it was hard sometimes if you wanted to have lunch, because, lunch, which is, you got it? Did you get that? What's lunch? I think it'd be dinar, no? Dinar and comida. That's lunch. Lunch was served usually at 2 o'clock. They have a special every day. They started doing those menus because for labor workers, to have something inexpensive to be able to eat at lunchtime. So I would, go out, walk everywhere, have my job, and then go somewhere for maybe a lunch for €4. Remember, there really isn't tipping over there too, so that's pretty inexpensive. And it's usually lunches from 2 to 5, 2 to 4, nothing after that. So you can't exactly, here you can show up at a lot of restaurants, anytime you want. You can't do that there. Let's see. I think that's it for that. Okay. Can you go to the next one? Now I'm going to talk about Alt Penedès, is where I really finally had my home. When you want to go to the next one? My place of work, they went on strike. Unfortunately, I was on the union at that time, and so everybody voted for a strike. And I'll say this really quickly because I thought it was interesting. These were all these were Americans on strike, and very often, and you will have to tell me if this is right or wrong, but I always had the feeling that when people go on strike here, it's to get people to come to the table, so it could last a while before people come. Over there, if you go on strike, it really is just for show. So you might have a day or two. If the train is on strike, maybe they'll have a couple, but you still have to make sure there's time for people to use the train. You can't just keep on going on strike. It's against the law. Well, there's the culture clash. The Americans in my school who voted for the American way to strike really caused a lot of problems for the workers who were there because we were on strike until they didn't have any students for a semester. Then they they negotiated a leaving package. So I don't know, I just thought that was I know a lot of the people, once the strike ended, really didn't want to see the American teachers there anymore. That was the time that we moved out here. Patty and I were already decided to get married, and he wanted to move out to this house. It didn't look like that then. it was not painted or anything. We moved to the house out in the country. He'd always wanted to live in the country, so we moved out there. This is a typical farmhouse. If you look at, the center door would have been where you would have brought in your carriage, but also would have been maybe for the animals in the old days. On the left usually was the kitchen, and on the right would be a sitting room, and upstairs were the bedrooms. At the back, there was a bodega for all their olive oil and their wine and whatever storage things they needed to store. We rented this place, and Patty kept on talking to the owner about wanting to start up a B&B, and that was a new concept out in Alt Penedès. It's a wine growing area, but for the longest time, it was very invisible in Catalonia. People, if you talk to somebody from Barcelona about it, they really look down on this area because they said, oh, they're all closed-minded and there's nothing there. So a lot of the people felt that way too. They thought they had nothing to offer. So when Patty was talking about having a B&B, nobody believed that anybody would want to come there, But it started getting, not because of Patty, but I mean, the B&B idea start catching on when the farmers were realizing they could make money with, some rooms in their house. So the owner of the house liked the idea so much, they kicked us out of our house because he wanted to have a B&B. So we lived there for a while. Claire was born in 95, and she was there for 3 years with us. Um, as I said, it's more of a white wine growing community, and they're famous for their sparkling wine called cava. This is very interesting, this sport, the castellers. They're human towers. How many levels of people do you see here? Can you count? One. That's the pina. That's everybody forming the base. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, 10. 10. The top is a little kid, the Anjaneta, which is an angel. They call it angel. Yeah. Well, they don't talk about that. They have good physical therapists. Claire, we knew some of the, from teaching. Like I said, teaching is great because you really get into the community another way. So one of Patty's students was a very established person in the Castellers. These are, by the way, the most famous teams. It's at the Villafranca de Penedès. The Penedès team is the most famous. So we got Claire in there. And their first try, I think she was 4, she got up 4 levels. And the training rooms they had lots of safety nets. And we were excited to be part of that. But going back to times in the day, training for little kids already started at 8, and it could last till 11. That was on Wednesdays, and Fridays it would start at 10 and go really late. And the people who were in this, their whole life was this. I mean, I don't know how many times a week they practiced. They also, all their weekends were taken up, their vacations were taken up for it. They traveled all over, and I just said, I don't think I can handle having so much dedication to this thing. But it was really cool to watch. I mean, one thing is seeing the picture, but if you could ever watch, or even a video, you don't see it. But when you're there, it's an amazing feeling because they are swaying, you know? So this one is a formation of 3. There's 3 people there of 10. I think they do one with just one person going up for 9. They got to 9. And when they fall, but they learn how to fall. Okay. So, as I said, as a teacher, I got in a bit within the community, but we didn't have any extended family there. What we found very quickly, see, I wanted to really become immersed in the culture, but families are families, and they do their family things together, or they do things together with their friends from babyhood. So there's not a lot of room for new friends. So pretty much the international community all found each other. That was my community. I had some friends. They let me. You can get in pretty far, but you can't totally get immersed, and that's okay too for some squabbles that happen in local community. But we did get in a little bit further, I'd say, than some people. What do you think? I had a real in besides teaching. What do you think my in was for this community? Well, no, I learned there. Want to go to the next one? Grapes. I was a mother of Claire. I became known as La Mara de Claire because everything. If you have kids, that opens all the doors because they go, oh, they're normal people. They got married and they had kids, so they're normal. They're not. They may be foreigners, but they're not totally weird, And it's our kids that got in. Plus, this family. This is a daughter of a family down the road where we lived. They had 5 kids, and they looked after Claire. They babysat Claire. And that family, I found out later, was really the heart of the community. And so the mother, Rosa, carried her around everywhere. And Claire she had really blonde hair, so it really was striking to people. So Claire grew up learning Catalan and English at the same time that way. She called Rosa Mama, so to this day, we still love that family, but they looked after her. Yes, we lived in the country. They still have shepherds and sheep. They have shepherds everywhere. Um, they also, living there with your kids, they also, partake in the customs. This is the costume that they wore for the cantaires, which is like a children's choir. So they were quite involved, and that means we were involved. That also meant like parents socialized around their kids. So if like, your kid was like my daughter was in volleyball, everybody would say, "So when's the dinner for the parents' dinner for the end of the season?" We all socialized around the kids, and maybe that's this way here too. I don't know. I didn't know what it was like to have kids here, but that was a big deal. Uh, hmm? Thank you. Yeah, that's my husband, Patty. Yeah, that's the reason why I stayed so long. Okay, the next one then. So, what does it mean to have your kids in the culture? Mainly school. This is Tommy there. I was in an Indiana Jones phase. He wore, everybody had to wear these smocks. And I know there's a lot of little things that I really had to learn. It's hard enough to figure out when you're having kids, how to get your schedule going and all this stuff. But I had to learn all these little things too. So everybody had to wear a smock. When you sent their snack to school, you had to make sure to have a little plaid napkin with it. There's lots of little things I learned as things went on. Because the kids later don't want to feel different from the other kids. Um, a lot of the other kids thought it was cool that they could speak English at home, but at Tommy had more problems with that with Claire. He didn't want to be different at all, so he hated it when we'd speak English to him in public. So I wish they could tell you their side of how it was to grow up with immigrant parents. Um, they had a preschool. So how did that begin? Usually, here's preschool. They call it parvulari. No, that's later. Well, you don't need to know the words, but usually they start the preschool at 1. Some places go to 9 months, but they'll start at 1. And then when they're 3, that's when really the public school starts at 3. Then when they're about 5 years old, 6 years, then they do it like here. They have their first, second, third grade. They stay in elementary school till 6th grade, then they move on to the secondary school, and you can leave school if you want at 16. Most people then either go the college way, they have certain programs to prepare you for college or vocation, or you just get a job or something like that. I won't go into it, but there were a lot of really hard lessons I learned. I used to see these parents being so panicked about getting their kids in the right schools, and because there were point systems. You couldn't just like say, I want my kid to go here. You had to have certain criteria. And I saw the parents doing certain things, and I didn't know why until they graduated. And then I thought, oh, that's why they did it. It's too late by then. So it was sort of hard. That was hard as a foreigner. Nobody tells you those things because everybody knows. School hours were normally, it depended on the school. A lot of districts made their own hours. Schools made their own hours, their national holidays, but they could make their own holidays too. And our school started from 9 to 12, and then they'd have lunch until 3 and have school until 5 after that. It was hard if you had my jobs tended to start at 5, so it wasn't easy. Their food was amazing. It was home cooked. And imagine you're over there. They eat in courses. So a bunch of little kids in the cafeteria getting first, second, and third course. If you didn't eat in the school, if the kid didn't like something, they made him stay there until 3. That happened to my son a lot. He hated fish, And in the village, the cafeteria leader would say, Mandy, please don't send Tommy to school if it's fish, because he sits there till 3. I think he finally learned to put some of it in his pockets. Another thing was religion. Obviously, I'm not Catholic. My husband was. And I didn't know how I felt about the baptism thing and the communion thing. But then there were other reasons why I didn't think about it later. But I saw that for the kids to feel like they're part of the community, they should go through communion, and they did. They each had their own communion. Just I don't know if that was right or wrong. I just felt maybe they feel more connected if they were. So there was Tommy over here in his communion. The priest really chastised him for not memorizing his prayers. And that was Claire at her communion, their Holy Communion. The preschool, the towns usually had it subsidized. So my preschool, for half a day in preschool, it was 80 euros a month. And for full time, it was like 120 or something like that. So yeah, you got help. Plus, a lot of families are still intact, so there's always somebody there to help take, not for us, but it usually some aunt or uncle or grandparents really played a strong role in raising kids there. Okay, the next one. Okay, so one of Patty's dreams had always, as I told you, had been to run a B&B. And after we weren't kicked out, they were nice. After we left that other house, we were thinking, what are we going to do now? Should we look for a house here? Should we go to the States? What should we do? So he looked around, and if you have never met my husband, but he was a dreamer. He was a dreamer and had tons of energy. So he finally found a place that we could go where the things were less expensive, and that was the road up, this town up the road, Torres de Foix. And I'll show you my house in a minute, but it was just up the road. If you want to go to the next one. Beautiful place. Before it used to be sort of a resort for Barcelona people, but over the years it had become industrialized. During the Franco's time, there was a lot of migration from the south of Spain up to the north, and they tended to go for factory jobs. And in my town, it had a lot of industry at one point. It used to be great in textile area in that area. So at one time it had been rich, and now it was bankrupt. So property was cheap. So Patty found this ruin. That's my house in the middle, this huge building. And we bought it for very inexpensive. And he had all the energy, not me, to work on it. This up here is a refuge, a sanctuary up in the mountains. Beautiful area up there. A lot of people do hikes up there. And in the background here, you can see the mountain Montserrat, which is very important in the area of Catalonia. It's their patron saint, Montserrat. And this was the natural park. It was a natural park, so it really was beautiful. But as I said, the socioeconomic status was pretty low. Can you move on? Next one? Okay, I just thought, I could do a whole presentation on my town. It was really a good place to I don't know. When I moved there, it was still in to have it just was normal for everybody to have small shops. There was no place where you went to buy everything. So you would go to the fish lady. This is Tere. She's the fish lady. The butcher, the bakery, the tobacco shop. All of those places were their worlds in themselves. Tere took over her mother. That's her mother, who's 90-some now. Her fish shop. So generations of people had their shops. One shop I know had 7 generations of running their shops. They all have their own personalities. I chose Tere. This is her day that she retired. Her daughter none of their kids wanted to take over. So the shop was closing. She was my go-to person to get any gossip I needed because people might not say things. This was my way to say, I saw this happening. Can you explain that? And she would explain everything to me. It was also a place to learn how to cook fish or cook. I'd go in there and say, "Hey, everyone, I want to," there'd be full of women buying their fish. And you'd say, I want to learn how to cook paella. And everybody would jump in and teach me how to cook that. So it was a very social way of shopping. Um, I put this in here because when the Bupps came to visit, Nancy really liked her shop because in the back she worked on her lace sometimes. So her shop was the one that would support the fish for like the popular paella at the top was once a year and on Easter Monday. And I don't know, it was just if you had time, that's the thing. If you had time, it was great going to each shop and talking to people. They teach you things. They tell you things. If I'm the only one there, they'll tell you everything. And I think it's because being a foreigner, they think you don't have anyone to tell or you don't have any interest in it. So they tell me some deep, dark secrets sometimes. Or the baker would tell me all his racist ideas as well. So, I mean, I learned a lot that way too. Uh, but it was a great town, but it's dying that way. I mean, the shop whose owner has said it's his seventh generation. He said he's not going to make his kids follow through. He said I had to give up university to do my parents' shop. I'm not going to make my kids do it. So I think it's going to die out. It was beautiful at the time, though. Do you want to move to the next one? Okay, now to my home. I don't know if you've had a chance to go to that QR code video. I can send you a link to it, but I guess we can go to the next one too. This is us the day we moved in. It was a ruin. The day that I finally moved the last thing to move into our house, which, as I said, is a ruin, so we were camping. I moved our dog and I lifted her up and my waters broke and Tommy was born. So I know when I bought this house. It was Tommy was born. Now, this house it was an interesting history. As I said, it was a paper mill built in the 1700s, middle 1700s. The local historian was thrilled that we bought this house. A lot of people, when they saw that we bought it, locals and foreigners thought we were crazy, and probably were. I would never do it again. But it was the town had looked into buying it because it's their heritage, but they said it was too big. It was too much work. It had been for many, many years a police headquarters during the Franco times. For 30 years, it was the headquarters. So it had a lot of bad memories to people. When we moved there, people still called it the police station rather than the moli, which is the mill. When the police finally moved out, the locals went around and they chucked stones at it, and all the windows were broken. Squatters set in. So it was pretty messed up. I know the family who originally had it. The family who originally owned this lived up the road, but they sold. There were several owners between them and us. When we bought the house, there was only one other person that wanted to buy it, and it was a developer who wanted to tear it down. So there was a campaign in town, Save the Mill. And so we had a really good welcome that way, because when they saw that we bought it and we wanted to save it ourselves, they were very happy with us. And we let them use the mill sometimes for their own. Once a year, they'd have a lecture on during their festival, and we'd host it at our place. It's a huge place. Let's see. Okay, the next one. So what do you do with huge places? Patty did realize his dream. He had the name of his tour company was El Moli. That's one of the millstones. That millstone is taller than me. There. That would have been for olives, I think. Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe wheat. Forever, I could remember Patty being dust covered because he was always doing something in the house. So he was always looking like that, covered with dust. And my kids learned to ride their bike in the house. For Thanksgiving every year, I had about 40 to 50 people, and I'd serve them in my living room. It was great. I learned that um, ovens are tiny. People don't really bake over there. So I would get this huge turkey and I would take it up to the bakery and they would bake it for me. They'd baste it and they put a beautiful wine sauce on it. So I always had a lot of guests at Thanksgiving, I'd say for the turkey. It was a very cold place. The windows did not keep the heat in. And oh, there it is. Yeah. We depended on a stove, a firewood stove. That's Patty, and they're roasting chestnuts up there. Even right before I left, I would always have to get a few tons of firewood to keep myself. I'm so glad not to have to do that anymore. That was so hard, going up into the forest to get kindling. It was a nice, cozy feeling once the fire was lit, and it didn't really keep you warm. I'm just going to show a couple shots of the house inside, but you have the video. Do you want to go ahead and show it? That was my kitchen. Man, did people, if I had those dinners, everybody ended up in the kitchen because, as I told you, there's my view. Remember at the beginning? Beautiful view. That's what I saw, this one down here when I looked out my window. That was my living room. So that's where, as I told you, we'd have Thanksgiving. That's just I only showed that one on the top right because that's one of the Catalan arches that they're pretty famous for over there. We only lived on the first, what do we say, the second floor. Yeah. Can you show the next one? Up there is the top floor. It had been, as I told you, it was a police station, and that top floor had been all these tiny little apartments. Patty cleared it all out. We never did anything with it except reinforce the floor. That's the front of my house. It's not that color anymore, but you see there's an aqueduct there on the right, and that's where the water came in for the wheel room. There's some olive presses up here, and some of those are wheels. They're very old for the mechanisms. That was my back, out in the back. And this is where Patty kept his bike shop or his rental down here. Beautiful room. Okay, can you go to the next one? So this man on the right, Nini, he was from France and he bought my house. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am about that. Well, my husband passed away in 2016, and I just could not keep that house up. I was so afraid every day that something was going to fall or break, and Patty had been the one to fix things up. So this man, we never had the money to really give it justice. This man is a film director, so if you ever look up his name, he has produced a lot of documentaries. Lovely person. He fell in love with my house immediately after so many years on sale. The people who'd come until then loved it, but they said it was too much work. He had the money. Last time I talked with him, I've told some people, he had just finished doing the roof. That's a huge roof. And he didn't just put a new roof up, he used the old tiles. And he had put in 43 new windows. He's torn down a lot of the walls to make projection rooms. And then he's a very good person. And I couldn't be happier that the house I love so much is in his hands. So we moved out. The last part I want to talk about is because of Felton. It's Felton's favorite part. I'll call it Felton Corner. Can you go to the next one? Talking about holidays. That's where you really do see a lot of cultural differences. But particularly, like I said, this is a Catholic country, so all of the holidays are celebrated. You get a lot of days off, but Christmas is a big deal, like it is here, I guess, but it's huge over there. It's a good example of some differences you can see. Can you look at the next one? These are all the dates that are important at Christmas time. In a few minutes, you see these children are all surrounding this little log. Some of you might have seen logs as decorations on your tables. I'll explain that next. But a lot of people told me the Christmas holiday wore them out because they would celebrate on the 24th. That's usually more like your Thanksgiving, a meal with your family. And it was a big family time. So you met with your family many, many times. 25th, obviously, is the Christmas time, also a time with your family. 26th is St. Stephen's. That's if you have another family you have to go to, and you couldn't go on the 24th and 25th, you go on the 26th. Obviously, December 31st is New Year's. That's usually with your friends, and they have really expensive dinners. Same thing with January 1st. January 5th is when the kings come to deliver the children their big presents. King's Day is actually on the 6th, but the kings come, parents sort of secretly bring their gifts to the kings and they deliver it to your family, to your kids. They come on their camels. The kids would have put out maybe some straw, maybe some cookies or something for the kings. So that's the big day. That's the 6th is a big gift exchange. Okay, do you want to go to the next? Well, that little log is this. The log there is called the cagatillo. And what happens is a week before Christmas Eve, there's a knock on the door. You open the door, and the little kid finds this guy, a log out there with a little face. And this is a boina. It's with the Catalan hat. The family takes the log inside, and they give him food for a week. They're fattening him up. And then on the 24th, little kids take sticks and they sing a song to this cagatillo, and they hit the log, and they say, "Please," I'm going to use this word because it's the least. They're telling the cagatillo to poo me a gift. So they're hitting it and say, "Poo me a gift." So they sing their song, and they lift up the blanket, and the adult goes, "Oh, he pooed you a gift. Here." That's what it is. So they don't have as much the same type of relationship as we do with poo, I guess, that way. But one of the things they tell the cagatillo to poo is turrons, this thing. It's a sweets. You don't get your big present then. It's little things to keep them distracted during Christmas. Can you see that? Or can you show that, Andrew, or no? I put this up so you'll believe me. It really does happen. Oh. I think a little further you'll see it. Yeah, there they are. There it is. That's okay now, but you have an idea. It really did happen. My parents couldn't believe it when I explained it to them. Well, and imagine, I mean, that thing is huge. You see it in the center of the city, and all these little kids are hitting this log. Another thing, if you want to go to the next one, traditionally, they do have Christmas trees now, but traditionally what they did was the kids and the family would make an enormous nativity scene. Now, not just like here we'll have the nativity scene with a stable pretty much, but they make towns around the nativity scene. You'll normally find a woman at the well, you'll find a blacksmith, You'll find, lots of farmers. And every day, the kings move towards baby Jesus until they arrive for Christmas, or sorry, King's Day. So kids usually start gathering moss to put around the stable, and they get a lot. For little kids, you tend to get little figurines, plastic ones, but a lot of people have really nice ceramic ones. Um, and you'll see in the middle of all of it, you can't see it, but there's one hidden figure that I'm going to show you now, but it has to be part of their nativity scene. You want to show the next one? He's called a kagane. Kagar is to poo. In every one of them, they hide him behind a bush or something, and they're very explicit, very explicit. One time, the kids for their Christmas at school, the little teeny ones came out dressed like this and sang their song, and then they turned around and squatted, and somebody had taken a thread and put a brown sock at the bottom of it and showed them actually doing. So it's part of the tradition. That's just what they do. I've tried to find out why. I've asked a lot of people, how did this ever get, because it's only there, it's nowhere else. And they said, oh, it's to make the kids laugh. I don't know why. But and I'll tell you something, there are live nativity scenes. There are. And I know who one of those guys were. It's become very commercialized. Can you go to the next one? In the fairs and Christmas fairs, you can always buy your little figures for your nativity scene. Well, the Kagane has taken off. Now that the foreigners know about it, they are selling them like crazy. And when Trump was elected, he was sold out before they put him up, because they put up VIPs. They put up a lot of famous people doing this. I have some up here. If you don't believe me, here's some. You can look at it another time, but they're traditional. And just little fun toys. So they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And yeah, there was Elvis. And they make a big deal. Who's it going to be this year? Who's the famous person this year? They're athletes, politicians, the Queen, everything. So anyway, again, my parents couldn't believe it when I showed them this. A lot of people don't believe it. But yeah, it's very, very, very popular. Want to go to the next one? So how did we handle all of these things as foreigners? This is in early days. It still wasn't, we were camping basically then. We did decorate our house. I mean, Patty and I had very similar, uh, Christmas traditions. I learned a few more about Ireland, but we had similar. So we did put up a little simple nativity scene. But one thing that the schools did is, let's say you open your gift on January 6th, that's a big one. Then you could have one day to play with your gift, and then you came to school on the 8th. And you would it was a show and tell time. So the kids would bring their gifts to school to show. And I thought, man, my kids we were giving gifts at Christmas time. So what I finally told the kids, because there was think about it, it's the kagatillo. First they get a few gifts, and then they also had Santa Claus only because of foreign influence, and then you had the kings. So I told my kids that all of them had come together and made a pact that Santa Claus would be the one that really brings the brunt of all the presents, and the kings will bring you one small present, just so they could have something to show at school the next day. So it was hard to manage all of those things together because, the kids talk about what they got and stuff. So we tried as much to follow it as we could. Let's see. Okay, that I wanted to show you just two more things. Okay, I just wanted to show you this group. This was my last dinner I ever had at my house. And all of those people I knew in 1990. So the people who stayed in Spain were usually married to a Spaniard, So these people, some of them are Spanish and some of them, they're all international. So I had friendships, the full 32 years there. And the last one, there's Patty drinking from the Puron. I wanted to make sure I really just know that I'm very thankful for it was Patty. I mean, like I said, I wasn't planning on staying there that long. I thought I was going to go to Spain for 2 or 3 years. And it was Patty who had always had that dream. I never would have done this, gotten that house as much as I enjoyed it. And I never would have done it without him. So he made our lives very rich that way. And we were sad to lose our home that way. The kids, when they were little, they used to say, I'm never going to live in a house like this. I want a modern, small house. But by the time I sold it, they were like thinking, no, that's our family home. So they came to appreciate it later. When I moved here, I only took a couple things from my home, and really, it was too much, too many. There was a lot of things I wanted to bring, but I didn't. Patty, one day, when they just paved the town, he accidentally walked on their pavement. And I came home and I said, "Can you believe some jerk just walked on that pavement?" And he said, "It was me." And I thought, well, at the time I was really embarrassed, but now I'm happy that he still has his footprints there. You know, when I go back, I can see him. I put up Roger only because he was Patty's right hand man. He'd been working with us since he was 19. And when Patty died, he really, really helped me. Just, I couldn't have even lived those last few years on my own if I hadn't had him. So I wanted him to have a place up here. Um, well, thank you for letting me share with you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer, but I suppose it's pretty late now. So that's it. That's it. Huh? Oh, the answer is yes. Number one, a common greeting for the friend in Spain involves, what did you put? Each cheek, yeah. In Switzerland, it's 3. In France, it was 2. Germany, it was 1. But and it was hard when Americans would meet. We didn't know what to do. Like, we already know number 2, right? Number 2 was the donkey. 3, basically to learn Spanish and reconnect with old friends. Those are the reasons I went back. There were many others, but I already had a job. Originally, you must have seen my house was a paper mill, and we already said the tallest castell was 10. Typical Spanish cuisine is spicier than Mexican. What do you think after today? False. It's not spicy at all. They don't tend to like spicy food. Nearly all Spanish youth leave home once they get a full-time job. No. When they get married, maybe, but people stick around. They don't want their kids to go. All babies born in Spain are automatically granted citizenship. I forgot to say this. No, my kids didn't get citizenship because Patty and I are not Spanish. If I'd married a Spaniard, yes, but it's not automatic. True or false? Doctors still make house calls. Yes, I had people come to my house. They still do that. I forgot to say that was one thing that was very calming living in that country. I always knew I'd be taken care of, with my health. 10, when do Catalan children? Well, you learned that one, right? We said January 1st, King's Day. 11, what did you put for that one? To graduate, you have to prove some proficiency in? Well, if you go to the university, you already had to have shown your evidence of knowing Catalan and Spanish. Now, you had to have a third language in Catalonia. You had to choose either English, German, French, or Italian. They called it the third language promotion. The rest of Spain, it was 2. Okay, there's only one thing in number 12 that's illegal. Only one. Taking pictures of the police. That's the only thing that's illegal. You cannot take a picture of the police. They'll come and get you. The rest, that's the thing. I went over there thinking everything was much more conservative. All of these things, they were one of the first to legislate euthanasia being okay. That's there. I think it was first Holland and then them. And marijuana use is always never really was never a problem over there. And nudism, what can I say? The beaches, but also there was used to be this guy that would just walk nude downtown. I couldn't believe it, but they didn't get him. The majority of the Catalan population live in, no, they live in Barcelona. As much as they would like you to think that the majority want independence, the majority doesn't want independence. So they make a lot of noise and you would think so, but it's not. Okay, I'll just tell you this next one. Merienda is usually eaten at 5. It's a little snack, usually a sandwich. Comida is at at 2 p.m. usually. That's lunch. Almuerzo or esmorzar is sort of like a late breakfast. So 9 to 10. Where is it? 10 a.m. Cena or sopa is usually, well, that can be anywhere. Starting at 8, could be all the way till 11. It's supper. And vermouth is usually just like potato chips, olives, and vermouth. And that's on the weekends, usually late before you go to your lunch. September 11th, I put that in there because it was just recently. That's B. It's commemorating the time they lost their independence. So, yeah, their Labor Day is on May 1st. And it's because in New York, there had been a fire in a factory of, I don't know if they were seamstresses or something. And a lot of women perished because they'd closed the doors. And Labor Day originally was for that reason. So they stick with May 1st. The Sagrada Familia is not completed. What do you think? Which day do they normally, if you go to a restaurant and during the week, which day they have paella? I would think that. It seems logical, but it's Thursday, every Thursday. There are a lot of, some people think it's because everybody trying to use up their last bit of fish. I don't know, because on Friday, that's when they get fish. That's it, I think. Did anybody get 100%? Okay, that's it then. Thank you.